I remember the heat first. The kind of heat that presses against your skin and turns every heartbeat into a drum of panic. And then the smell, smoke curling through the hallways like a serpent, thick and suffocating. I could hear the crackle before I even realized what was happening. My bedroom door wouldn't budge. Not a creak, not a groan, nothing, because someone had nailed it shut. And then it hit me, they were trying to burn me out. I was crawling toward the window, fingernails scraping against the scorched wood, coughing through the black smoke filling the room. And from the lawn below I heard the faintest, most horrifying sound. The click of a camera. My daughter, she was filming. She wasn't running to help me. She wasn't screaming. She was documenting my terror like some macabre art project. My heart shattered into pieces I couldn't even name. Even now, writing this, my hands shake remembering the betrayal. Not the fire. Not the locked door. Not even the fear of dying alone. But that cold, quiet choice my own child made, to witness me suffer instead of saving me. I pulled myself through the window, limbs burning, hair sticking to my face with sweat and soot. The grass beneath my hands was wet with the morning dew, and yet in that moment, it felt like falling into ice. I landed awkwardly, a harsh thud that bruised more than my body. It bruised my soul. I looked up and my daughter held the camera high, her face pale, eyes wide but unyielding. She didn't reach for me. She didn't move. She only filmed. And in that instant I realized something even more terrifying than the flames. The people I trusted most had turned against me. I am Marjorie, 67, a widow who had spent her life quietly keeping her family together. I never expected betrayal from the people I loved. But slowly, over the past months, subtle things had been building. Money disappearing, whispered conversations, the way my daughter and son-in-law avoided my questions. And now, this was no accident. This was calculated. As I crouched in the lawn, coughing and dazed, I felt a strange clarity settle in my chest. Fire destroys, yes, but it also reveals. And I was seeing the truth now. I was seeing the people who had smiled at me while plotting my pain. Somehow, someway I would rise from this. And I would make them see what it meant to betray someone who loved them without question. I look up at the house, still smoking, and my hand brushes the camera my daughter dropped in the grass. In its memory card, I suspect, lies more than images. It holds proof of everything they've done behind my back. But reaching for it might be more dangerous than staying away. The fire was still licking the edges of my house when I picked up the camera from the damp grass. My fingers trembled as I turned it over, half afraid of what I might find, half hoping it was empty. But the memory card inside buzzed with the weight of secrets. Each click of playback sent shivers down my spine. There I was. My terror, my struggle to escape, recorded in chilling clarity. And there she was, my daughter, standing silently, filming every moment. No panic, no reaching out, just her eyes locked on the viewfinder as if my suffering were a story she was desperate to tell the world. I sat on the wet lawn, smoke curling into my hair, and tried to make sense of it. How had it come to this? My family, the people I had raised, loved, and protected, had become strangers in my own home. I remembered the subtle signs I had ignored. The money that went missing, the hushed phone calls behind closed doors, the way they flinched when I asked simple questions about the estate. I had dismissed it as paranoia, but now the truth was burning in front of me. I wanted to scream at her, shake her until she understood the magnitude of what she had done. But the words caught in my throat, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I couldn't let anger make me reckless. That fire had already taken too much from me. The house was gone, yes, but I still had one thing they didn't. The ability to see clearly, to act deliberately, to survive. Later, in the quiet of the neighbor's garden, I sat wrapped in a borrowed blanket, watching the smoke rise like a ghost of my past. The fire department had been too slow to arrive, and even then they were polite, almost indifferent. They treated it like a routine call, but I knew better. Fires didn't just happen. Not when every lock and nail screamed intent. And then came the first doubt. The gnawing question I had tried to ignore for months. What else had they done? What secrets had they been keeping from me all these years? My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was now a stranger with a camera in hand. My heart ached with the betrayal, and yet, underneath it all, a spark of clarity flickered. I would uncover everything. Every whispered lie, every hidden betrayal. And when the time came, I would confront them, not with screams or chaos, but with the precision of someone who had survived the fire and refused to be consumed. As night fell, I returned to the edge of the burned house, watching the charred frame under the moonlight. And then, buried beneath the ashes near the fireplace, I saw something glinting. Something they hadn't expected me to find. The moonlight made the charred remains of my home look almost beautiful, a cruel contrast to the nightmare it had become. I knelt at the edge of the fireplace, brushing away the blackened ash with trembling fingers. That's when I saw it. A small ornate key almost invisible against the soot, its brass edges dulled but intact. I picked it up, feeling the weight of something far heavier than metal. It was a key to more than a lock. It was a key to the secrets they thought they had buried. My mind raced. Why leave this behind? Was it a mistake or, more chillingly, was it a trap? My daughter's camera flashed in my memory. Every angle she filmed, every moment she captured had been deliberate. Did they know I would survive? Had they planned this next step, thinking I wouldn't have the courage to dig further? The thought made my stomach twist, but I forced myself to breathe. I had survived fire. I could survive this. I remembered my daughter as a little girl, hiding behind my skirts with wide, innocent eyes. She had once asked me, "Mom, will you always protect me?" And I had promised her, my heart swelling with love and certainty. How fragile those memories seemed now, like glass in the palm of my hand, beautiful but capable of shattering at the slightest pressure. Wrapped in the night's cold, I returned to my small rental apartment, clutching the key. The city hummed around me, oblivious to the horror and betrayal I carried like a second skin. I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window, the steam rising slowly, masking the tears I refused to shed. Every sip reminded me that life, even after devastation, must continue. But the key burned in my pocket, a reminder that the real story had only just begun. As I sat, I made a list in my mind. Questions that needed answers, truths that had to be uncovered. What had they taken from me besides the house and my sense of safety? What had my daughter learned from her father, from the whispers behind closed doors? And most importantly, why her? Why would a child raised in love choose to watch her mother burn? The answers wouldn't come easily. And yet, even as doubt gnawed at me, a sense of calm determination settled in. Betrayal may have broken trust, but it had not broken me. I would unravel every secret. I would face every shadow they hid behind. And when I finally stepped into the light of truth, I would do so with the grace of someone who had survived fire, not just in the home but in the heart. The key rested on the table beside me, but when I examined it closer under the lamp's harsh glow, I noticed tiny etchings, almost like a code carved into its surface. And in that instant I realized this key wasn't just to a door. It was a door to everything they'd tried to hide from me. The key sat on my table like a challenge, small but insistent, whispering secrets I hadn't yet earned the right to hear. I traced the tiny etchings with my finger, each line deliberate, precise, almost like a code. My heart pounded, not with fear but with a strange thrill. I had survived fire. I had survived betrayal. And now I would survive the secrets that had been buried beneath layers of deceit. I spent hours researching, cross-referencing old letters, bank statements, and my late husband's journals. There were gaps, omissions, hints of hidden accounts, and legal documents I had never been told about. Every discovery felt like pulling a thread from a tapestry of lies, unraveling carefully constructed illusions that my family had built around me. And in that tapestry, my daughter's role became clearer, not just as an observer but as an accomplice, manipulated by those she trusted most. Yet as I worked, I felt a strange tenderness for her, buried beneath the raw ache of betrayal. She wasn't entirely herself. She had been groomed, shaped by whispers in the dark, by ambitions and fears that were never truly hers. And that realization gave me clarity. My revenge would not be loud. It would not be chaos. It would be a quiet reclaiming of truth, one that left no room for excuses, no shelter for lies. By nightfall, I had a plan forming, fragile yet potent. The key was to a safe deposit box hidden in the city, long forgotten and unmentioned in any conversation. Inside, I was certain, lay documents, evidence of everything. Money siphoned, signatures forged, contracts manipulated. Every betrayal had a paper trail, and I intended to follow it. I paused at the window, looking out over the city lights twinkling like a field of stars. The memory of my daughter filming me in the lawn burned in my mind. But instead of anger, I felt a quiet resolve. I would confront her, yes, but not as a mother scorned in the heat of panic. I would confront her as someone who had survived hell and emerged with purpose. The wind carried a faint scent of smoke from my old home, a reminder of the destruction they had wrought. But it also carried possibility that, with patience and precision, justice could be served without fire, without violence, just truth laid bare. I finally held the key up to the light and noticed a tiny symbol engraved on its tip, a crescent intertwined with a star. My stomach tightened. I knew this mark from somewhere, and the memory threatened to reveal a secret I had long tried to forget. This key was not just a clue, it was a map to the heart of their deception, and it might lead me straight to my daughter's darkest complicity. The next morning, I woke with the key in my palm and a sense of purpose that pushed away the lingering shadows of fear. I dressed quietly, careful not to disturb the neighbors, and stepped into the crisp air of early winter. The city was waking slowly, indifferent to my turmoil. But I felt the quiet hum of determination inside me, an energy I hadn't known I still possessed. I made my way to the bank, each step deliberate. The key's symbol burned in my memory, the crescent intertwined with a star. It was subtle, almost elegant, yet its significance was profound. The teller barely glanced at me as I requested access to the forgotten safe deposit box, and I could feel my pulse quicken with anticipation. Every moment of waiting, every hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, felt like the ticking of a clock counting down to a revelation I had been both dreading and longing for. When the box finally opened, I found a stack of envelopes tied with a thin, faded ribbon. I pulled one out, carefully breaking the seal, and my breath caught. Inside were contracts, bank statements, and notarized documents, proof of money diverted from my inheritance, forged signatures, and agreements I had never signed. Every lie, every betrayal meticulously recorded. My daughter's complicity became even clearer. Her signature in some documents was alongside hers, faint but undeniably hers. Tears threatened to fall, but I pressed them back. I needed clarity, not chaos. My mind went back to the day I had crawled through that window watching her film me. She had done this before too, documented my life while remaining detached from it, always an observer, never a participant in honesty or love. Yet I felt no desire to scream at her. She was a piece of the puzzle, not the entire picture. My focus had to remain sharp. I spent hours at the bank meticulously photographing every document, making a careful record. Each paper was a thread in the tapestry of betrayal they had woven. And yet, despite the anger, a strange calm settled over me. I realized that survival had taught me something precious. Control over one's actions is far more powerful than rage. By the time I left, the city lights were beginning to glow against the encroaching dusk. I held the documents close, a tangible form of justice I could wield. The fire had destroyed the house, but now I held something stronger, the undeniable truth. And with it I would rebuild, not just my life but my dignity, my authority, my self-respect. When I returned home, a small, unmarked envelope was waiting in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single typed note read, "You shouldn't have found this. Now you know too much." And beneath the words, a photograph of my daughter, smiling innocently, holding the exact same camera she had filmed me with that day. The envelope burned in my hands before I even opened it, a physical pulse of warning. I stared at the photograph inside, the smile frozen on my daughter's face, the camera in her hands. It was the same camera she had filmed me with, the same instrument that had turned my terror into a performance for someone else's amusement. My chest tightened, memories of smoke, heat, and betrayal replaying like a relentless film reel. Yet even in the grip of fury and heartbreak, I breathed. I refused to act impulsively. This was no longer a matter of survival. It was a matter of precision. Every move I made now would be a calculated step toward uncovering the full truth. The photograph, like the key and the documents, was another piece of the puzzle, another whisper of the reality they had tried to bury. I called my daughter that evening. Her voice, so familiar, sounded strange over the phone, soft, tentative, with a hesitation I had never heard before. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. Instead, I asked questions, careful ones. Questions about her camera, about what she had filmed, about why she had stood by while I struggled to escape the fire. Her answers were fragmented, evasive, defensive, but I listened. Every word, every pause, every stutter revealed more than accusations ever could. Later, I sat by my window, the envelope on the table before me, tracing the photograph's edges. The city stretched beneath me, indifferent yet alive, lights flickering like distant memories. I thought about the girl my daughter had been, and the woman she had become under the weight of someone else's ambitions. Betrayal had shaped her as much as it had shaped me. And for the first time, I felt a fragile spark of understanding beneath the hurt. She was not entirely beyond redemption. But understanding didn't mean forgiveness, not yet. First, the truth had to come to light. I would confront her with evidence, not emotion, with facts, not fear. The documents, the key, the photograph, they were tools. Tools to untangle the web of deceit she had been ensnared in. And when the confrontation came, it would not be a scream in the dark. It would be a quiet, undeniable revelation. That night I drafted a plan. I would bring her to the truth step by step. No traps, no theatrics, just clarity and inevitability. And as I traced the crescent and star engraved on the key, I felt the weight of a future I was finally ready to claim. A future where lies could no longer hide in shadows. Before sleep claimed me, a sudden realization struck. The key wasn't just a key. It was part of a larger network of hidden safes, hidden accounts, and secret agreements, all of it leading directly to the heart of the betrayal. And if I wasn't careful, someone was already watching me as I pieced it together. The next morning, I awoke with the sunlight streaming through my window, dust motes dancing like tiny ghosts in the quiet room. I could almost feel the pulse of the city beneath me, oblivious, ordinary, but I knew better. The key in my hand felt heavier than ever, a symbol of the hidden maze I had stumbled into. As I examined it again, the crescent and star glinting faintly in the light, a thought crystallized. This key was only the beginning. I began retracing the documents from the safe deposit box, connecting names, dates, and transactions like threads on a vast, dark loom. Slowly, patterns emerged. Offshore accounts, unnamed beneficiaries, transfers that had disappeared into legal voids. My daughter's signature, once a minor curiosity, now pointed to deliberate involvement. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized the betrayal extended beyond her. It was a family network carefully orchestrated, hiding in plain sight for years. I felt the weight of it pressing against my chest, threatening to crush me with its enormity. And yet I refused to falter. Fire had taught me resilience. Betrayal had taught me caution. And now I learned strategy. Every document I scanned, every number I verified, brought me closer to the truth, closer to reclaiming the life they had tried to steal. By late afternoon, I had uncovered a hidden ledger, painstakingly coded, its contents hinting at property sales and inheritance diversions that had been systematically concealed. The handwriting was meticulous, clinical, almost as if each act of betrayal had been recorded with pride. And buried within, unmistakably, were references to my daughter, her role carefully documented, her participation deliberate. I closed the ledger and leaned back, my mind swirling with a mixture of sorrow and clarity. I thought of the house in flames, of the camera poised on the lawn, of the life I had once taken for granted. The realization hit me. They had believed I was powerless, that my survival instincts would falter in the face of orchestrated disaster. But they had underestimated me. I had survived fire, betrayal, and fear. And now, armed with evidence, I would dismantle their illusions with quiet precision. As night fell, I prepared for the next step, confronting my daughter not with anger but with undeniable truth. She needed to see the depth of what had been done, not as a mother scolding a child, but as someone who had survived the darkest days and refused to be broken. I heard a soft knock at my door, almost hesitant, and then a familiar voice whispered my name. It wasn't my daughter. It was someone else, someone from the network of betrayal, and I realized they had discovered I was digging. And they were watching. The knock came again, insistent this time, vibrating through the thin walls of my apartment like an unwelcome heartbeat. I didn't rush to the door. I never rushed anymore. Each step, each breath was deliberate, measured. My hand hovered over the doorknob, feeling the weight of everything I had uncovered, everything I had survived. When I opened it, no one was there. Just a small envelope lying on the mat. I picked it up and my pulse quickened, not with fear but anticipation. Inside was a single note, typed in cold. Stop digging, Marjorie. Some truths are meant to remain buried. The handwriting was impersonal, almost bureaucratic, yet it carried a weight far heavier than ink on paper. I felt a flicker of fear, yes, but it was quickly replaced by determination. Whoever sent this thought they could intimidate me, make me hesitate. They had forgotten one fundamental truth. I had crawled through fire, and fire had taught me patience, resilience, and strategy. I set the note aside and turned to the documents spread across my table. Every ledger, every signed contract, every photograph of my daughter now formed a web I could follow, a map of deception stretching far beyond what I had imagined. And I realized with a quiet thrill that they had underestimated me from the beginning. I picked up the phone and called a lawyer I had once trusted, explaining only fragments, careful not to reveal the full extent of what I knew. Within hours, a plan was forming. Legal channels, investigative procedures, protections that would expose the network without putting me directly in harm's way. They thought fire and fear could silence me, but the law and truth were now my allies. Later that evening, I watched the city from my window, lights shimmering against the dark. My daughter appeared in my thoughts, her betrayal raw and vivid. I felt anger, yes, but beneath it an unshakable resolve. I would confront her not with rage but with clarity. The truth was a mirror, and she would see herself in it, unflinching, undeniable. And as I traced the crescent and star etched on the key one last time that night, I felt the first flicker of what survival really meant. Control. Not over them. Not over fate. But over myself, my choices, and the quiet reclamation of a life they had tried to burn away. Just as I placed the key beside the documents, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A voice, calm but chilling, whispered one sentence. "You're closer than you think, Marjorie, but closer to danger than you realize." The voice on the phone disappeared before I could respond, leaving a cold silence that pressed against my chest like a weight. Whoever had called knew I was close, and the urgency in their tone left no room for hesitation. I set the phone down and took a deep, deliberate breath, steadying myself. Fear could wait. Now was the moment for strategy. I knew I had to confront my daughter soon. But not with anger, not yet. First, I needed to lay the groundwork. Drop pieces of truth, test her reactions, see what cracks might appear. I sent her a text. "We need to talk. It's about the house and the past." Her reply was immediate, short, defensive. "I don't know what you're talking about." I smiled faintly, though no one could see me. Of course she didn't know, or maybe she pretended not to. That was part of the pattern. I had watched it for years, the careful construction of lies and avoidance, the rehearsed innocence. But now the pattern was unraveling and I held the threads. Later that evening she arrived. She tried to appear casual, but her eyes betrayed her. I could see the tension, the uncertainty, the faint flicker of guilt that she worked so hard to hide. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. Instead, I spoke quietly, almost conversationally, as if discussing the weather, though every word carried the weight of revelation. "Do you remember the fire?" I asked. Her face paled. "Do you remember what you did? And what you filmed?" She looked away, chewing her lip, searching for a response she didn't have. That was all I needed. That flicker of recognition, the brief moment where her carefully constructed mask slipped, told me everything. She had seen it all. She had been complicit. But she had not yet fully understood the consequences. I let the silence stretch, a tool as precise as any weapon. Then I laid out a few documents, just enough to hint at the scale of the deception without overwhelming her. Her eyes widened as she realized the scope of what had been hidden from me, from her, from the world. And I watched quietly as she grappled with guilt, fear, and a dawning comprehension. It was the first step toward reckoning. I would give her the truth slowly, deliberately, just as I had discovered it. She needed to face the weight of her choices, but I would guide her, not with fury but with undeniable clarity. As she left, trembling and pale, I noticed something on her coat, a small, folded piece of paper that she dropped without realizing. When I unfolded it, my breath caught. It was a list of names. People involved in the network. People I hadn't yet suspected. The list of names lay in my hands like a map to the heart of a conspiracy. Each name carried a weight, a hidden connection, a carefully concealed betrayal. I read them slowly, savoring the clarity that came from finally seeing the full scope of the web. These were the people who had thought they could manipulate me, intimidate me, erase me with fire and fear. They had underestimated me. They had forgotten the resilience of someone who had survived the impossible. I began calling the lawyer again, outlining each name, each potential lead, each shadow of deception. My voice was calm, measured, deliberate. No one could suspect the storm gathering behind my eyes. We began drafting legal actions, protective measures, and exposure plans. Every step was calculated, precise, leaving no room for error. The fire had taught me urgency, the betrayal had taught me patience, and now the law would be my instrument. In the days that followed, I contacted banks, trustees, and even former employees, all carefully, subtly. Each conversation was a probe, each question a test, and slowly the puzzle pieces started to fall into place. I was no longer just a survivor. I was an investigator, a strategist, a quiet force moving unseen through a network of lies. And all the while, my daughter was learning from me, whether she realized it or not. She watched my methods, my calm resolve, my refusal to let emotion dictate action. I could see it in the way she paused before answering, the way she looked at documents with newfound understanding. She was beginning to grasp the consequences of complicity, the weight of betrayal. And I allowed her to feel it, not cruelly but with the inevitability of truth. One night, I returned to the apartment after meeting with a trustee. The city was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a dog. On my table lay a letter and signed, threatening, warning me to stop. But I smiled softly because threats no longer frightened me. I had learned that the real power lay not in fear, but in knowledge, in control, in the steady unraveling of deception until every lie was exposed. I spread the list of names before me, connecting them to the evidence I had gathered, and I realized something profound. I wasn't just reclaiming my life. I was reclaiming justice itself. Every move I made, every revelation would ripple through their carefully constructed world, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Late that night, my daughter knocked on my door, trembling. She held something in her hands, a small envelope. She whispered almost inaudibly, "Mom, there's more." I didn't know how deep it went. And in that moment I understood. The final truths were finally within reach. The envelope my daughter handed me trembled in her hands, and I could see the fear and uncertainty etched across her face. She was no longer the confident observer I had faced months ago, no longer the child who had filmed my terror with detachment. She was raw, vulnerable, and beginning to understand the depth of the deception she had been caught in. Inside the envelope were documents I hadn't yet seen. Contracts, bank transfers, even emails linking her father's closest associates to a network of manipulation and greed. It confirmed what I had suspected all along. My daughter had been a pawn, yes, but the strings were pulled by others, carefully hidden in shadows. The fire, the stolen inheritance, the lies. It had all been orchestrated with chilling precision. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every betrayal, every loss, every sleepless night. But instead of despair, I felt clarity. Every piece of evidence was in my hands now. Every truth was laid bare. And with it came the knowledge that the reckoning would be precise, inevitable, and quiet. Justice without spectacle, truth without theatrics. I called the lawyer, laying out a full strategy to expose the network, reclaim stolen assets, and ensure accountability for everyone involved. Each name, each signature, each act of betrayal would be addressed. I wasn't seeking revenge and anger. I was seeking restoration, integrity, and closure. Then I turned to my daughter. Her eyes brimmed with tears, and I placed a hand over hers, steadying her trembling fingers. "You need to see this," I said softly, guiding her through the documents, the evidence, the undeniable proof of manipulation. She listened, sometimes flinching, sometimes nodding, sometimes letting the truth wash over her in waves she hadn't anticipated. It was a quiet reckoning, intimate and profound. She apologized, not just with words, but with the weight of realization in her posture, in the way she finally acknowledged the consequences of her choices. And I forgave her, not because what she did was small, but because understanding and redemption were possible. By the end of the night, the plan was set. The legal action, the exposure, the reclamation, it would unfold like a careful symphony. And as I looked out the window, the city lights twinkling like stars reflected in the river, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace tempered by strength, tempered by wisdom, tempered by survival. The first morning after setting everything in motion, I stood outside the rebuilt house I would never inhabit again, watching sunlight spill across the lawn. And in that light I knew, the fire had taken much, but it had left something far stronger. Me whole, unbroken, and finally free. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of burnt wood from the house that had once held my memories, and my nightmare. I stood at the edge of the lawn, sunlight spilling across the grass, and for the first time in months, I felt a profound stillness settle over me. The fire had taken much, yes, but it had left something far stronger. Me. Whole. Unbroken. Free. The legal actions were underway. Every name on the list, every hidden account, every act of betrayal would be addressed with the authority of truth. They could no longer hide behind deceit, manipulation, or fear. The network that had once thought themselves untouchable now faced the inevitability of accountability. And I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Justice, after all, is quiet, relentless, and precise. My daughter approached, tentative but steady this time. She didn't hold a camera. She didn't flinch or avert her eyes. She simply stood beside me, and for the first time I saw her, not as a betrayer, but as a woman capable of understanding remorse and growth. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice trembling. "I didn't know how deep it went, and I didn't know how to stop it." I placed a hand over hers, the warmth grounding me. "You can help now," I said softly. "You can choose to make it right. That's all anyone can ever ask." And in her nod, small and quiet, I felt a fragile, budding trust returning, a recognition that the past was not erased, but it could be understood, reconciled, and transformed. The house behind us smoldered no more. Its ruins had been cleared, leaving only the open space for new beginnings. And as we walked together across the lawn, I realized something vital. Survival is not about returning to what was lost. Survival is about claiming what remains, shaping it with wisdom, courage, and love. Later, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the city, I sat by the window, sipping tea, feeling the rhythm of life pulse quietly around me. The key, the documents, the revelations, they had served their purpose. The fire had burned away the illusions. The betrayal had revealed the truth, and now, in the quiet aftermath, there was peace. I thought of every moment of fear, every gasp of smoke, every tremor of betrayal. And I knew in the deepest part of me that none of it had been wasted. Each step had led here, to clarity, to justice, to healing. And as I closed my eyes, the warmth of the sunlight on my face, I whispered to myself, "I am free. And the world finally is as it should be."